I am your host, Canary T Robot, and we've got a special guest with us today. Not like every guest that joins me on the show is special in one way or another, and I don't mean in the lick the pace special type of way. Today we have Mr. Ben Paddon.
Hello.
Hello, Ben.
Hello, Ben. It's an old joke, but it's a good one.
It is a good one. What makes Ben Paddon special? Well, why don't you tell us yourself, Mr. Paddon?
Oh gosh, I mean, I've done so many things over the last 10 years. I co-wrote and co-produced the 4-part Left 4 Dead parody web series Boomer's Day Off, which has an accumulated, I think, 5.6 million views on YouTube. I co-wrote and co-produced the 6-part Doctor Who parody web series Dalek Gary, which has significantly fewer hits, but, you know, they can't all be winners. I was the head writer of the science fiction comedy webcomic Jump Leads, which at its peak had tens and tens of thousands of viewers every day, and is currently in the process of being adapted as a sci-fi comedy audio play series, which will be releasing as a free podcast, because I'm a mad person and I like just giving stuff away. And most recently, I'm probably best known for British Candy Authority and Port Center, where I talk about British Candy Authority. I talk about American candy. I eat a candy bar and outline its shortcomings in an unscripted vlog. And Port Center is me talking about interesting and unique ports, conversions, re-releases of old video games, what makes them unique, good, bad, etc. And I've been doing that on and off now for 3 years. Blimey. Yeah.
Trust me, chances are somebody's heard your British accent somewhere on the internet at some point.
Yeah, I pop up in weird places. I've done guest spots on, as an example, the now defunct Chainsaw Suit podcast with Mikey Newman and Chris Straub. I'm on the Chainsaw Suit original YouTube channel. It's where Port Center technically lives at the moment, and I have narrated a Did You Know Gaming video as well. So I
did not know.
You didn't know? Yeah, that happened, I want to say last year or the year before. It was an episode about the Super Mario Brothers 2, or Super Mario USA as it's called in Japan, or Doki Doki Panic if you want to be that person.
Oh, I totally am that person. I am
cool.
Actually, I don't know shit about it. So now, let's get to the meat of the question that I basically begin everything else. How'd you get started writing? I mean,
there's a question. Was there more to the question? Because I feel like I just cut you off.
Well, I mean, the one thing I always, so far I've been beginning with was, tell us your resume. But, I mean, you basically gave me your resume. But, I mean, I guess now, and always the next question is, how did you get started? I mean, what was the first thing you started writing?
Oh God, I mean, if we go back to my youth, the first fully formed story that I remember writing, start to finish, and then printing and binding as a kind of novella, if you like, was, and this is gonna both date me and make me seem ever so slightly pathetic, Lemmings fanfiction. No, I mean, when they did Lemmings 2: The Tribes, there was, you know, they had tried to create an actual lore and a narrative for the game. It wasn't just get the lemmings from the trapdoor to the exit. They actually tried to craft a story where there's these 12 tribes on an island and you're trying to get them to the center so they can ride the arc to freedom, because I guess Armageddon's coming or some such nonsense. So I wrote a fan, what I didn't realize at the time, but, you know, I can look back on it now and see it. It was a fan fiction about a lemming who was tasked with visiting every one of the 12 tribes and letting them know about the impending disaster. And it wasn't particularly interesting or entertaining or even good. But it was a story, and it was this journey that I can't even remember what the character's name was, but just that he took. And then I did little writing assignments for school, and I wrote another piece of fan fiction based on the Alien Breed video games by Team 17, who later went on to make Worms and Super Frog and so on. And I used to write short sketches and skits, which were at the time very, very heavily influenced by Monty Python, to the point where I would actually have skits interrupted or outright brought to an abrupt end by a very kind of aggressive British policeman who was frustrated with how silly things had gotten. Very Graham Chapman. In fact, it was Lift. It was a direct lift. It was a lift of Graham Chapman. But I learned, for me, I learned about writing through reading screenplays for things like, telescripts and screenplays for things like Star Trek: The Next Generation and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy audio plays. I would have the scripts open on my lap and watch the episodes, or in the case of Hitchhiker's Guide, listen to them. I always knew that I wanted to tell stories, and I always knew that I wanted to write stuff. And that's just kind of what I fell into. I wouldn't say, maybe fallen into is the wrong thing, because it was something I actively craved. It's one of the reasons I moved from England, which is a thoroughly depressing and defeatist place to live.
Oh my God. I just lost all my English listeners, even though though the listeners are very small right now, but that's cool.
It's 5 English listeners, and I am 2 of them.
Yay!
Well, I subscribe on iTunes and on Podkicker on my Android phone. But no, I mean, England is the English, for the country that basically won the Second World War, they're surprisingly defeatist people. You tell them that you want to be a writer or an actor or a stand-up comedian, and their attitude is, well, yeah, maybe, but that's probably not going to work out. So you want to get yourself a regular job full time, and you want to get yourself a house and a mortgage, and find someone, settle down, get married, squeeze out some kids, go home, eat dinner, watch telly, eat, sleep, work, sleep, eat, sleep, work, sleep, die. And I got very.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I mean, I got very little in the way of actual support from friends and family in the UK. I forgot to put my phone on silent. I got very little support from friends and family in the UK, and it took, it's one of the reasons why I decided to move here, because whenever I'd come to visit my dad, because my dad had moved to Los Angeles in '97, whenever I would come to visit here, everyone was so supportive and enthusiastic, and so I moved here in 2007, and, I mean, people say, oh, Los Angeles is full of phonies, and, nobody really gives a shit, and my feeling is I will take fake enthusiasm over genuine depression any day of the week. I would rather be pushed on and spurred on. That's what spurred on, I guess, is probably the actual word. I would rather have that fake encouragement from people who aren't actually invested than people who actually claim to love me and support me and care about who I am and what I want to do, telling me not to do it because there's no point, because I'm not going to succeed anyway. Like, I know the odds are stacked against me. Like, trying to make it as a creative in the creative field, like, that's you have a 1 billion to 1 chance of making it as a creative. But as Terry Pratchett so astutely observed, 1 billion to 1 chances happen 9 times out of 10, and they cannot happen to you if you don't make the effort, if you don't put yourself out there. So that's one of the reasons why I moved to America, was to try to make that happen.
And just letting you know, it's not just England that's like this. Actually, a lot of places.
Yeah, there are places
in America too.
Like yeah, America it has places like that where people don't get why you would want to be a writer or an actor or a stand-up comedian or a novelist or a musician. Anyone who wants to do something that is creative is going to come up against people who don't understand that need, that want. That I know people who are professional voice actors, for example, who have been doing it for decades and are actually making a living at it. Like, that's their primary income, and they still get asked by their family, by their mothers and brothers and sisters and family members, so when are you going to get a proper job? And it's like, this is it. This is what they want to do. This is what I want to do. I may not be a household name yet. I may not have a sizable fan base, but we all start somewhere.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons I wanted this podcast to exist, because people don't hear this enough. And you believe it or not, there are a ton of cities and a ton of locations in America, all over the world, where people don't feel this way, or people do feel this way, that they're like, well, why are you doing this? Why would you want to go into this creative field? And this is a way to like help people out and say, no, you can do this. And even if you're in BFE Arkansas or whatever, or North Carolina, or we'll even say like in across the country, in Europe, in Germany, Australia, wherever.
I mean, even here in LA, you know, I mean, just because LA is a place where, you know, creatives come and congregate, that doesn't mean you're not going to face that, you know, here as well. There are people here who, you know, say, I want to be a writer, I want to be a director, or, you know, a producer, and people go, what? But why do you want to do that? And it's like, well, you're not the one doing it, so why do you care? Like, let this person who has a dream and has an ambition and drive and a goal, let them work towards it. And if they're successful, that's fantastic. And if they're not, be there for them. Don't be such a fucking negative Nancy. Don't do it. Don't be that person.
Exactly. Now, I got a question. You mentioned like your first startings of like writing in general, but what about writing that started to make waves like in the network or on the internet, or maybe even like you started getting paid for it or whatever?
The first thing that I wrote that I was actively putting online that wasn't fan fiction, because I was writing for a short while I was writing Discworld and Red Dwarf fanfic under a pseudonym. But the first thing that I put on the internet under my own name that I was happy with and proud of, I did a webcomic from 2003 to 2006 called Fried, Fried. Don't look for it because it doesn't exist anymore. It's not online. Pardon me. In my youth, you can edit the burp out, or you can not. You can do whatever you want with that.
I didn't even hear it, so I was like,
I felt it. I thought it was louder than it was, I guess. But yeah, I've always, not so much now because I have tendonitis, so I can't actively hold a pen. But I used to doodle a lot as a kid, and that grew into an interest in cartooning and comics. And for 3 years, I was doing a webcomic called Fried, which featured a character called Joe, who I'd been drawing since I was, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years old. And just, you know, him and his roommate Reg living together, and how that all panned out. Some of it was really funny, and some of it was less so. And some of that material I've since rolled into my stand-up set, and some of it has been rightly forgotten, because I also do stand-up comedy. Burying the lead there a little bit. But I did that for 3 years, and the writing got commended a little bit. I had some very positive feedback on my use of color, which was not something I'd really thought about with the webcomic, but a lot of people apparently liked the colors I was using. And after a while, my friend Ewan Mumford, who he had a webcomic for a while called Rooms, and would later go on to help me with the jump leads, came on to help me co-write the thing, and we kind of went off in a weird kind of pseudo sci-fi direction with it, which was kind of fun. And I ended that comic in 2006 because I just wasn't having fun with it. I realized I wasn't enjoying drawing, but I was enjoying the writing. I was loving the writing, but I didn't like having to sit down and draw the characters and the expressions. And that's a shame, because I've tried to come back to drawing a few times since, and I have done some stuff that I'm happy with, but it never came back to me. And Fried kind of died a death. But in late 2006. I broke up with. Breaking up is not really the right word. I got out of a very abusive relationship. It was a really rough time. It was nearly, when was it? 2003. So it was about. It feels like it was 3.5 years. I lose track.
But that's fine.
Yeah. But it was a long relationship. It was 2 to 3 years of being in a relationship with this person who was kind of manipulative emotionally, and very, very, very good at emotional blackmail, very good at controlling. And I was easy to control because I had very low self-esteem and very low confidence, and didn't really believe in myself at that point. And she fed on that, and she fed into that. And in October of 2006, I got away from this person and decided I was going to immigrate, and I guess kind of born from that want to escape, I started writing a a science fiction comedy called Jump Leads, which is about these two trainees, Mini and Llewellyn, who are trainees in a kind of, it's called the Lead Service, a kind of self-appointed reality police. And their job, when they complete their training, is to travel to parallel universes and fix things, like anomalies and, basically police reality. And in the first story, instead what happens is during a field training exercise, their chaperone gets killed, and they wind up jumping from random parallel universe to random parallel universe in a broken down interdimensional ship called a jump ship. And it was basically my attempt to write something that fused the styles of both Doctor Who, of which I've been a lifelong fan, and Red Dwarf, which is one of the best science fiction comedies ever conceived of by man or beast. And it was kind of my attempt to kind of get that chocolate and that peanut butter and smush them together into something that, didn't have peanut butter in it, because I don't like peanut butter. But I
love peanut butter and chocolate. That's like my favorite combination.
I do like peanut butter and Nutella in a sandwich. I will accept that, but generally I don't like Reese's Pieces or Butterfinger. I don't like the way that Americans have candified peanut butter, which is a shame because
get out of my podcast now. We're done. Just kidding.
The one thing that Americans do really well generally is peanut butter. They just haven't figured out how to make it work as a candy. But anyway, so I came up with these characters. I wrote a script. I sent it to the BBC. I wrote it for television, and I got some very, very positive feedback from the BBC about the script. They love the concept. They love the characterization.
How'd you send it to the BBC? Like, it's interesting when you hear people say, like, well, I sent it to this company, and you're like, well, how'd you do that? How did you just email them, or
the BBC have they have something called the BBC Writers' Room, which is designed specifically to cultivate and encourage new talent, and they take script submissions. So I wrote what was ostensibly a pilot for this show, Jump Leads, and sent it to them, and waited, I want to say like 2 or 3 months, and eventually got a response, a very, very friendly letter saying that it's strong. The comedy is good, the concept's strong. The key criticism that they had of that first script was that the main characters aren't proactive. Like, nothing, the story happens to them, they're not part of the narrative. And that's still the case. If like that story ended up being the first issue of the comic when it appeared online, the story does happen to them, but I don't necessarily think that's negative. I don't think that Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Indiana Jones, that story happens to him. You remove him from the story, and the results are exactly the same. The Nazis find the Ark of the Covenant and get their faces melted off. There's really no need for Indy to be part of that story.
Mm-hmm.
And yet here it is. But, I that first, when the BBC said thanks but no thanks, I basically decided, well, I can still do this as a webcomic. So I started looking for an artist. And in, I want to say April or May of 2007, a friend of mine put me in touch with this guy online called Jajar. I sent him the script and said, well, first I sent him an email introducing myself. I said, I'm working on this thing. Would you be interested? He said, let me have a look at the script. So I emailed him the script, and his response was 2 pages of character concept art and pencils for the first 4 pages.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So we launched the webcomic with the first 4 pages in July of 2007. How did you launch that? Like, what website did you go through, or did you make a website, or? Oh yeah, we made the website. My friend Daniel Daniel Barno, who's been one of my most trusted people when it comes to web stuff. I still go to him if I need help with web design and so on. I designed an outline in Photoshop and said, this is what I want the website to look like. This is what I want to happen when you mouse over this element and so on and so on. And he, from my random scribblings and graphical elements I'd send him, built a fully functional Jump Leads website that would allow me to upload pages that could be amended and updated, and posts could be made on the fly. And so we launched our own website, which is still online to this day, jump-leads.com, where dash is, of course, a hyphen. And we started uploading we do a page a week. Sometimes we do 2 pages a week when Jajar's schedule allowed. But most notably, like this, I wasn't the only one writing. I had my friend Ewan Mumford, who had helped me with Fried, Andrew Taylor, and Paul Varley were kind of the core creative team, where usually I would say, here's a concept, I wrote a writer's Bible, and I said, write a story, just go for it. I didn't ask for pitches, I said, send me a script. And I learned a lot through that process. I was basically the head writer. I was kind of the Chris Carter, except maybe with a little less focus. Of jump leads, and I wrote I think, like, of the stories that went up online, I think I wrote 4 of them, 4, maybe 4.5, and then the rest were either written by Ewan, Paul, or Andrew. And then my friend Ben Paddon wrote a guest story. Chris Carter, who is not the Chris Carter I just referenced, but is a Chris Carter who's a cartoonist and illustrator and colorist, who's done coloring work for IDW titles like G.I. Joe, Transformers, Doctor Who.
Wow.
Actually contributed a story which I liked so much that he did it as kind of a guest thing, and I liked it so much I said, this is part of the narrative now. Like, this has happened to my characters. I loved it so much. And then the webcomic, I want to say in about 2010 or 2011, we were doing a story which was going to be kind of like our big season finale story that led into kind of what would have been basically like season 2, for want of a better word, where the narrative would have shifted and we would have played around with the concept a little bit more. Jajar started getting a lot of freelance work and was no longer available to work on the comic full time. So we brought Chris to help us out, initially to help us out with the coloring. So that was one thing that Jajar didn't have to worry about. And then when Jajar said, I'm sorry, I don't have the time to do this, we had another fella come in by the name of Mr. Philby, who very graciously volunteered to help us finish the last story. So he stepped in at about the halfway mark through that story, and then we were updating anywhere between once a week and, once every month or two. So readership at its peak, like when the comic was, like, I would say 2009, we were getting tens of thousands of readers. I think at one point we broke 100,000 uniques in a day, and that was like,
oh wow,
yeah, I mean, the webcomic was doing really, really well. And I still get messages from people who are like, I remember reading the webcomic back in the day and I just rediscovered it. And, it was very, very edifying to be writing what is really a long form comic, where it's like a comic book, but we're uploading maybe 1 or 2 pages a week. Like, that's not really sustainable for a webcomic format, I don't feel, unless you're doing a page a day, 5 days a week. I don't think that's sustainable. Sorry.
That's okay.
Pardon me.
Bless you.
You definitely want to edit that out.
Nope.
So yeah, the comic was doing quite well. We did some cross promotional stuff with Starslip Crisis, and Tahid Bondia was doing a comic at the time called Good Ship Chronicles, which was kind of Star Trek meets The Office, which I really, really liked. I'm so sad that he didn't keep doing it, but we did cross promotional stuff with them as well.
How did you do cross promotion stuff? Like, what do you do for cross promotions?
Well, with Starslip initially, it was Chris had there's online advertising called Project Wonderful, where you basically bid for the ad space, and it's super, it's not tremendously expensive, and it generates a little bit of income for content creators online.
Is that still going on today, or?
Yeah, Project Wonderful is still available. You can advertise on people who are using it to, generate revenue for their website, or you can put Project Wonderful ads on your own site and let people bid for it. It's a pretty nifty system. It never generated a huge amount of income for me, but it did allow us to cover things like basic hosting and stuff, which was really cool. But I advertised on Chris's site through Project Wonderful. He doesn't have Project Wonderful on his site anymore and hasn't had for quite some time, but he found the comic through my advertising on his site. We stayed in touch. We got it. We would email each other and send messages, and I think I ended up being on a couple of live calls on his Ustream channel back in the day when he would stream while drawing. One time he called me while I was in line for Iron Man. Mate, see it with my dad. And where was I going with this? I know where I was going with this. Yeah, so Chris Straub ended up he did this big Starslip crossover event that I can't remember the name of right now, that featured a ton of crossovers with a bunch of characters and ships from various science fiction webcomics like Melonpool and Station V3. Actually, I'm not sure if Station V3 was in it. I think Zortic was involved. There were a few other sci-fi characters and sci-fi webcomics, and he was basically doing this big multiversal crossover event. And Jump Leads was for a time pretty heavily involved in that, and that was really cool. And then he never finished it because it wasn't working as a cross-promotional marketing tool, I think, in quite the way that Chris had hoped for, which is a shame because I thought what he was doing with the characters and the ship was pretty bloody amazing. And then with Tahid Bondi, it was the same thing. I advertised on his site with Project Wonderful. I think he advertised on mine. Like for me, like one of my favorite moments was actually looking at who was currently advertising on the Jump Leads website through Project Wonderful and discovering it was Telltale Games advertising one of their Sam & Max titles. And I thought that was such a cool thing. And I'm sure that they just had this general like advertising campaign going out and didn't really see where they were advertising. But the fact that this game was being advertised on my site, I thought was such a cool thing. But yeah, the comic ended in 2012, 2013 there, but I think it was 2012. And I left it for a while. I didn't do anything with it. But I always planned to come back to it, whether it was in comic form or something else. I always wanted to do more with these characters. And then I decided it was about a year ago, that I wanted to actively pull the trigger on doing it as an audio play series, and wrote the first few episodes and recorded the first 2 episodes, I think about nearly a year ago now, actually. Basically, that was our pilot. And we've been kind of very slowly trying to get the ball rolling on recording the rest of the first season, and that should hopefully be happening very soon.
Yeah, I actually was able to listen to the first episode, and it sounds fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. We worked very, very hard on that. The sound design is all Sean Lyle, who is an award-winning sound designer, soundsman, edit person, and he just knocked it out of the park with everything. I kind of sat in with him, and he would ask me for advice and what do you want this to sound like. Like the sound of the jump ship was one of the first things that we designed, like that sound taking off, that kind of the key churning in the thing, and then the slow build culminating in that pop, which I can't now do because of the tendonitis. But that was something that he and I worked on for like a couple of hours to get it to sound right. And it's, you know, the show would not have sounded half as good as it did without his guidance and involvement and love, and he made Jump Leads sound phenomenal. That's to say nothing of the cast as well. Chris Dorman, who was in the web series 813, who is absolutely phenomenal, does a spot-on Patrick Warburton in that first episode. Dina Andrade, who, of course, you know, anyone who's played World of Warcraft or Batman Arkham Asylum has heard his voice. Voices a number of characters in that first episode. And then Marissa Mizell, who is a stunningly talented voice actress who I'm almost 100% confident she's going to, you know, we're going to go to record the first season later this year, and she's going to say, I'm sorry, I'm unavailable. I got booked for this, you know, studio gig for, you know, they're reviving Animaniacs and they want me in or something like that, you know, and we're going to lose her, and it's going to be absolutely devastating, but she absolutely deserves it because she's phenomenally talented. And all these people coming together in their free time, because I can't afford to, you know, pay anyone, but who read the script and care about it enough to want to make it happen is just, it's just, there's no word for it, you know, there's no word for how it feels to have people want to breathe life into something that you've written of their own volition without, you know, paychecks. It's just absolutely amazing.
You know, it's interesting when I'm not gonna lie, you're kind of name dropping, but at the same time, it's fascinating how you can meet all these creative people. Like I know who Chris Straub is. Like working with David on Midnight Marinera, he's the writer of Candle Cove.
Yeah. Which is mind blowing. Like I didn't know it was him when I first found the story online. And I actually asked, because I did an episode of Port Center, I did a Halloween episode in my first season that looked at an entirely fictional Candle Cove video game, and I'd initially sent him an email saying, hey, do you mind if I do this? And I'd never heard back from him, and I thought, fuck it, I'm just going to do it anyway. And I may be misremembering this, but I'm pretty sure he said it was one of his favorite Candle Cove things that he'd seen. And But that was a lot of fun to write and do. And I remember editing it and thinking, I'm like, this is so lame. And this is one of the reasons why I don't write horror, because I get in my own head about horror and I think, is this too obvious? This feels too obvious. And I think that there's a difference between something that is obvious to you and obvious to a wider audience. Because I finished editing that episode, that Candle Cove episode, and thought, this is terrible. I've taken a brilliant idea that Chris has had, and I've shat all over it. This is a disaster, but I have to upload it because I've spent so much time on it. So I'll just upload it. People will hate it. It's fine. It doesn't matter. I'll carry on. And people love it. People still talk about the Candle Cove episode of Port Center that I did. But I'm not ignorant of the fact that I absolutely made that episode off of the back of, the wonderful writing that Chris did. And I couldn't, like half the time, I can't remember how Chris and I actually ended up like talking and getting friendly. And he's one of the most friendly, wonderful, supportive, imaginative writers, creatives, I think, working on the internet right now. And I'm not saying that because I know him, because even if he and I had were to never ever speak again, I feel confident saying two things. The first of which being, I wish I was still friends with Chris because he's a top guy, and the second thing being, he's blisteringly brilliant. I honestly think that the work that he does is astounding, and I feel privileged to know him and to have been able to work with him on a couple of occasions.
Now, I actually get a question. This is actually a genuine question for me,
Sure.
But I think a lot of people could benefit from this. You've been able to keep relationships with all these amazingly creative people. Now, I'm not going to say how, because those stories could go on and on and on. But I know there are multiple ways you can meet someone, and I'm going to just tell this to any listener out there. Go to conventions. The internet is a beautiful thing. You can get to know people there and work with them. And just meeting people in your daily life, it just like anything like that. Now, the question is, how do you keep these friendships without feeling like you're overstepping your boundaries, or like thinking to yourself, oh, they're famous, or they're too good for me, or something like that? Because I've spoken with a couple of people and in the past, and they've always said, oh my gosh, I would love to ask advice from this person. I'm like, and I've said, oh, I can completely connect you to them if you want to, and they're like, oh no, I couldn't do that. So
that's a very big question, and I don't feel like there is a right or wrong answer to that, other than don't be weird. Like, don't be super creepy. I'm very lucky in that I very rarely feel like I get starstruck. Like, oh, fuck you, cat. Come on. Really? I'm very lucky in that I don't feel like I very often get starstruck. I've been starstruck. The only time I get starstruck is when I meet anyone who's ever been in Doctor Who, and I mean that absolutely sincerely. Like, I met John Barrowman at San Diego Comic-Con in 2009, and Naoko Mori, who played Tosh in Torchwood, and I couldn't talk. Like, I was freaking out. And then later, they both, got a copy of the first Jump Leads book off of me, and I thought that was really, really sweet of them. And that's really the only time that I've ever lost it, or will ever lose it, is if I meet like Katie Manning, who played Jo Grant in Doctor Who from season 8 to season 10 back in the 70s. I mean, she was just an absolute delight, and I got to talk to her about following one's dreams and being a creative. And I feel like I say being a creative, or the word creative, a lot. Now, I don't want people to think that's a douchey thing, because it's not. But like, there's so many. It's such a wonderfully all-encompassing word for like writing, acting, being a musician, being a songwriter. Yeah,
that's the word I use when for this podcast. It's like, well, what do you do? It's like, well, it's to help creative people become creative professionals.
Yeah.
And it's hard because it's like you wish to use another word, like you want to say artist, but it's like, but that's not as all encompassing.
Yeah.
Or entertainers, and I'm like, even then, that's not all encompassing.
Yeah, because I mean, I genuinely believe this. Art is not always about entertainment, and entertainment isn't always about being happy. or art even. I feel very strongly like people, and this is particularly true in America, I don't mean this in a disparaging way. This is an observation rather than a condemnation, but people have this idea that you should reach the end of a movie or a TV show and you should feel happy, and I don't think that's true.
I don't
fundamentally I disagree with it. It is not the place of good art to leave you feeling happy. Good art, good television, a good film, a good book, a good song, a good novel, a good painting, a good sculpture shouldn't just make you feel happy. It should make you feel, and that's why whenever people get pissy about, like, oh, this character died on this TV show, it happened a while ago now, so I feel free talking about it without potentially spoiling it, but when Ianto Jones died in the 3rd season of Torchwood, people, and it was a very small, very vocal minority, was so angry that it had happened. But it's like, tough.
Mm-hmm.
People stopped watching Torchwood as a result of that. And in fairness, all they missed was the last episode of Children of Earth, which was really, really good. So their loss. And then all of Miracle Day, which was not as good. So, their gain, I guess. They lose one good episode and 10 mediocre ones. So fair dues. But television media stories aren't just about putting a smile on your face. They're about putting a feeling inside of you. They are about the people who help craft that piece of art ejaculating emotions inside of your chest cavity, and you have to feel them. You have to feel them. Like, if you finished Torchwood, if you got through all 5 episodes feeling like an emotional fucking wreck, good. I'm glad that you feel that way, because that means that it touched you emotionally. And that's what art is. I don't know. I'm deviating from the thing because I know that we're supposed to be talking about relationships, and I think honestly I'm procrastinating, which I do fairly frequently, because I don't think there's a good answer to that. Like, I don't know how I cultivate these friendships and these relationships, and I not even with other creatives, not even with, like, quote unquote big names, because a lot of people gravitate towards me, and for the life of me I cannot. I mean, this is a conversation that you and I have had separate from this podcast.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't get why people are drawn to me. I cannot understand it. People, some people have said, oh, it's because you're charming, which I don't agree with. I think the accent does a lot of the heavy lifting. People have said, one person said to me, it was someone I met at Gallifrey 1, actually, the Doctor Who convention they have here in Los Angeles. Someone said to me that when I talk, I'm open, and when I listen, I make the person I'm listening to feel like the only person in the room. And I don't know whether that's true, because I can't remove myself from myself and get that perspective. But that's the first time I guess anyone's ever articulated why and how I'm, for want of a better, I don't know what the term would be, like a magnetic personality. I don't feel that way, but people are drawn to me. People want to stay in touch. And
one of the things. Go ahead. Go ahead. I don't mean to interrupt.
No, I mean, I wasn't going to say anything of particular value. I mean, one of the things that I'm known for on the internet is in 2010, Doug Jones came to my house to give me a haircut, and those photos are on the internet. They're very easy to find. But people are like, how did that happen? How does Doug Jones, how does Abe Sapien, how does, the faun from Pan's Labyrinth come into your home and give you, a trim and a haircut? And it's like, we met at an event, we got chatting, we swapped contact details, we followed each other on Twitter. I mentioned offhand on Twitter one day that I needed a haircut. He offered to come over and do it, so he did. Like, I don't. It's a wonderfully, delightfully mad sequence of events that led to me getting a haircut from a guy who once played a supernatural fish person, and Doug and I still, we still occasionally see each other, and he's always big and warm and friendly and ridiculous. And when he hugs you, it's like being, his spindly arms wrap around you, and it's like getting hugged by Jack Skellington or a giant spider. But he's a genuinely warm person. But he, for whatever reason, thinks I'm the cat's pajamas. I have a producer friend at Paramount who feels the same way. Like, she's my biggest fan, and I don't understand it. I don't get it. But she's so warm and open and friendly and supportive that I'll give her you know, if she needs me to volunteer to help her with a project, then I'm there, because she's just such a kind person. She's helped me out in so many ways over the last few years, from booking me for private parties to do stand-up to letting me use her AAA when my car's been in trouble, and buying me lunch and dinner every now and then, you know? Like, I don't know what I have done to merit the level of support and love from people who don't know me, let alone the people who do, and yet, you know, here we are. It's the background radiation of my life, is this unquantifiable support system and this friendship with just impossibly kind individuals, including yourself, you know, people who are who for whatever reason think I'm worth investing their time and friendship and love in. And I don't know how to quantify that in my own head, and I don't really know how to articulate it, and it troubles me sometimes, but I'm thankful for it, because I don't think I would be here without it.
You know, I was once told, like, I've worked in the entertainment industry before. One of the things I was told was I'm too nice. And that actually hit me really kind of hard at the time, because I thought, wow, so because I'm too nice, I can't survive in this industry, or I can't work in entertainment because of this. But as I start to, I mean, the reason I do this podcast is because it's on my own terms. Well, and I don't have to follow the entertainment industry rules, but I've been able to connect more with people in entertainment and with artists and creatives, etc., by just being nice. And
Yeah.
I realized just being a good, friendly person, and just recognizing that people are just people, and it hasn't really made all the difference in the world.
Yeah. I think that, I mean, everyone is just people, you know? I mean, when I was exhibiting at San Diego Comic-Con last year, and there was a point where they'd closed off the alley near us, because they were going to be leading the cast of Batman v Superman to the Warner Brothers booth. And I was joking, Ben Affleck is stopping me from peeing, because I needed to go to the bathroom and I couldn't get to it. So I was like, Ben Affleck wouldn't let me pee. Which dovetails rather nicely into an event from like 2008 where he very nearly hit me with his car. I don't think he even knows that happened, but he doesn't know who I am. Come on, let's be real. But, you know, I joke, oh, Ben Affleck stopped me from peeing, but the reality of the situation is he didn't have any control over that situation. He's just a guy who was doing a job. He was doing it was part of the promotion for the film. Like, he's just, you know, he's an employee. He's just trying to get through his day like everyone else. Everyone is just trying to get through the day. And I firmly believe that every action that everyone takes throughout their lives is done with two goals in mind. They don't want to go to bed hungry, and they don't want to go to bed lonely. And I think on a good day, I managed to cover half of those bases. And that's kind of the connecting tissue between everyone on the planet, is that we all want to make sure that our basic needs are met, and we want to, you know, have people in our lives who, you know, bring something to the table and make us feel like we are valued, and who in turn we can then place value upon, and maybe if we're lucky, make them feel valued. And then if we're lucky, you know, further down the line, there's you know, you get to be in a loving relationship with someone, and you get to, you know, share a bed and argue over whose Steam account gets to use the, you know, the gift card that your mother got you for Christmas, because you only got the one card and it's for both of you. Like, you can't split it. That's not how they work. You know, and there's something. We're all just people, and I think that we elevate quote unquote celebrities and successful household names. We elevate them because they're everywhere. Like, everyone knows who the Kardashians are, and the Kardashians are famous.
But even sure. let's not take it that high. Let's
sure.
even start at a lower level. I mean, there's people I've spoken to who are like I have one of my friends was just in shock that I could possibly be friends with the voice actor who voiced Gur from Invader Zim.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just baffled me because I'm like, I live in LA. It's not that hard. But he's just like, oh, that's so cool. Oh my gosh, what's he like? Oh, and it's just like, it's amazing another good example is like, I befriended, like people in bands, and people will just like, if you get that right name, they will geek out and be like, oh my gosh. And they think they're higher just because they've reached some level of fame.
Yeah.
It's they know it.
It's like a couple of weeks ago when I posted an old photo from a few years ago of me sitting on a couch with Patton Oswalt, and people are flipping out. And it's like, oh my God, how did you meet? Well, you're just sitting next to him like he's a normal person. It's like, well,
he is.
He is a normal person. And we were sitting and having conversations about like Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and principally the Serenity comic that he'd written that he was there to promote because it was, House of Secrets, and it was a signing event, and then, and Ricky as well, who was the voice of Gur, is it's easier for me to not really see him as the voice of Gur because I never saw Invader Zim growing up. Like I was never exposed to it. I know a lot of people keep telling me I should see it, but I'm not
going to tell you if you should see it or not. I did see. I'm on the opposite spectrum. I did grow up watching it, and I knew the voice really well. And actually,
my sister knows the show as well. She's a huge fan of Invader Zim, and I see Ricky and I see this delightfully goofy looking man with the vibrant hair and the hat and the waistcoat and the weird choices in shirts and pants and shoes, and I think that is a character. Mm-hmm. And
he's a character in his own right.
Oh yeah. Oh my God.
I could so easily separate him from Gur.
Yeah.
Like there's like it's like a point. It's like I'll talk to him and then all of a sudden I'll be like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
He voices Gur. Huh.
It's the same with Dino. Like I met Dino before he did Arkham Asylum, but with Dino it's before anything else, Dino is a friend and a brother. He's family to me. He's one of the first friends I made when I came to this country, and I'm not gonna like mince words. Like the shape of my life would be radically different if I had not met Dino. Like the friendships I've made, the relationships I've had, the work that I've done. Without Dino, just simply, it would not have been there. I owe Dino everything that I have. And I love him for that. And I love him for the person that he is. And he's this wonderful, supportive, tiny, tiny man.
Tiny.
He's not that short, but he's shorter than me, therefore he's tiny.
Everybody's shorter than you, though.
That's what makes it so funny to call everyone tiny. Dino, the fact that he's now the Scarecrow in Batman Arkham, or he's been the Scarecrow in Batman Arkham Asylum now, like for 7 years, and he's all over World of Warcraft now, and Neverwinter and Star Trek Online. Like, I don't think of him as the Arkham Asylum guy. I don't think of him as the Scarecrow. I don't think of him as the guy who's done voices for World of Warcraft. I think those are successes that someone I care about has had. And when you're friends with someone who is a creative, who's had those successes, that's how you think of them. I don't go around telling people, oh, I'm friends with the guy who played Abe Sapien. Because that's not who would do that? What kind of douchebag does that? I think of Doug first and foremost as one of the nicest people I've ever met. And the fact that he's also been in these movies and the fact that he was the Silver Surfer and, I just think what a tremendously talented guy. I'm always bowled over by the talent of the people that I know. And I'm not, I think of Dino and Doug and Ricky on the same level that I think of people like you and David and Chris and anyone else. I just feel very fortunate to be surrounded by talented friends who are good at what they do, and who care about what they do, and who also very luckily for me and for them happen to be wonderful, wonderful people. I think if you turn around tomorrow and murdered 50 people, I'd be upset about that.
Wow, that
And
just took a dark turn.
yeah, I don't even know why I took that turn. I think I'm just tired, to be honest.
Okay, actually, I probably should get back on topic.
Sure, yeah, let's do that.
Let me first off, I should ask, what do you do for the writing process? Well, consider writing like any job. What do you do as a when someone goes to work, they go through a daily process. What's yours for writing?
I don't have a daily
Or not daily process, but
like how do I get a story out of my head and onto a page?
or more like well, what do you like writing a script? Like, do you just start off with a draft? Who do you send it to? Da 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 da.
I mean, that's such a big question. But well, they're all big questions. If this weren't a podcast of big questions, there wouldn't be any point in doing it. But my writing process has changed so much, and not just over the years, but like very recently as well. Like when I wrote that first episode of Jump Leads, it was literally this is the story that's in my head, and I just bashed it out, and I went through and made it funnier, and then I saved it, I printed it, I mailed it to the BBC, and I made very few revisions between the BBC saying yeah but no, and sending it to Jajar to eventually draw as a comic. My process used to be come up with a basic idea, have a rough idea of what direction you want to take it in, and just write, let it pour out. I didn't do outlines and treatments, and I still kind of don't. I don't like outlines and treatments because I don't like feeling constrained by where I want the story to go. I don't feel like, well, if a character says this or does that, I don't want to feel like I can't go off in this direction instead. I want to feel like I can, for want of a better term, I want to feel like I can let the story tell itself rather than me telling the story. And I realize that sounds, again, cocky and arrogant, but that's how I've written some of my best stuff. More recently, my writing process, particularly on Jump Leads, writing the audios, has changed significantly because I switched writing software. I used to use a program called Celtx, CELTX.
I used to use that.
Yeah, it's free script writing software. It's available. You can buy desktop versions for the Mac. You can also get free versions for Android and iOS devices. But they used to have a Windows version, and they stopped supporting it. So you have to use their web platform, and I really don't like their web platform. It's buggy and inconsistent, and you have to be connected to the internet to use it, which I really, really do not like. I want to be able to sit and write in a distraction-free environment, and I cannot do that with Celtx. And the fact that they staunchly refuse to support Windows as a platform anymore is like, okay, well then you don't get any of my money. Sayonara. So I switched to another program that I use right now called Scrivener, which is for PC and Mac, or it's for Windows and Mac. And Scrivener, I think, might be the best writing software I've ever used. It is wonderful, not just as a scripting platform, not just because it has templates ranging from, American screenplay to BBC radio play scene format, which is what I use for Jump Leads, or I use a slightly tweaked version for that. But because it is designed with writing as a process in mind, it's designed to, write your treatment and write your, scene by scene outlines and, figure out how you want your plot to break down and collating your research. Like you can, when you make a Scrivener project, you can import like documents and web links and stuff when you're doing research, and that is absolutely invaluable, and it's become invaluable to me. So my process now when I write, compared to how I used to write 10 years ago, is I do write a version of an outline in Scrivener. And I write, Scrivener has this kind of, for want of a better term, this corkboard where you can put on like note cards. And on each note card, I write a very, very brief synopsis of what that scene is about. And I can then double click on that note card and it opens up that scene so I can start writing the scene. So I'll do that. I'll move stuff around. I'll rewrite stuff. It was through Scrivener. I did a massive rewrite of one of the episodes of Jump Leads that will be coming out as an audio, because I realized structurally this story would be more interesting if I changed character motivation A to character motivation B instead and moved that motivation from this character to this group of people. And I was able to play around with that on the corkboard on Scrivener and realized, oh my God, this is so much better. And I don't think I would have been able to do that if I were doing my previous method, which was basically busking a story, just kind of sitting there and, bashing it out and hoping that, I get returns. You know, I have so many unfinished scripts because I just sit down to start writing, or I would sit down to start writing, and I reach a point where I didn't know where the story needed to go, or where it should go or could go, or it would just run out. Like whatever I'd poured into it had run dry. Whereas I haven't run into that yet with Scrivener because I'm writing these outlines. And writing outlines isn't for anyone. Like Russell T Davies, when he was running, he was the showrunner of Doctor Who, famously never wrote an outline. Never did an outline in his life. He knew where the story needed to go, and he could see it in his head. And he was a very visual man. He would draw cartoons and stuff, but he was never felt beholden to writing a treatment or an outline for a story in his life. And the only time he ever did that when he was having dinner with Kylie Minogue to pitch a story to her to appear in a Doctor Who Christmas special, which ended up becoming Voyage of the Damned. That's the only time when he's ever felt compelled to write an outline for an episode. And even then, he made that up on the fly while he was having dinner with her. He didn't prepare that ahead of time.
Nice.
So, I mean, there's no one real correct way to write. Whatever your process is, whatever gets the story out of your head and onto the page in the best form possible, that's your process. And celebrate that because it works for you. Like, not doing a treatment or an outline worked for me in a few instances because it allowed me to write some of the best stuff I've written. But I honestly think the stuff I'm doing now that I'm using Scrivener, and I don't mean to sound like I'm plugging the crap out of it, but
this is why this is good to hear. Like,
yeah.
Nope, I didn't know about Scrivener.
Scrivener's fantastic. I mean, I've dabbled with, like, Final Draft is like the industry standard for script writing. I don't like Final Draft. It's very constrictive. And there's stuff it just doesn't do. Like, it doesn't do audio play script formats. It doesn't do them at all. I really don't like that. But Scrivener does a lot of the stuff that Final Draft does, in some cases better. It does a lot of stuff that Final Draft doesn't do. And Final Draft is like $200 and change. Scrivener's $40. Like, the cost of entry to be able to write scripts in a format that the industry can kind of look at and go, oh, I know what this means. Ranges from as low as free, if you don't mind using stuff like Celtics or Celtics, however it's bloody pronounced, to $40 if you want to use Scrivener, which you can, online sales like NaNoWriMo. If you buy Scrivener with a NaNoWriMo discount, you save 10% on that. Or I got it 50% off during a sale on a separate website. That's $20 to $40 or $20 to $45, depending on whether you're on a PC or a Mac, for what is, I think, the best script writing software on the planet. It's fantastic. There's other software out there. You can shell out the 200 clams for Final Draft. Those tools are available to you, or just use OpenOffice, use LibreOffice, use Microsoft Word. Find the tools that work for you and use them and tell your story, because there's nothing stopping you. There's absolutely nothing stopping you. Those tools are out there. You can use Notepad if you want to,
Now, I got a question. I know this is kind of taboo, blah, blah, blah. Have you ever been paid for any of your positions or your writings?
Yeah. I've been very lucky. I wrote for a web series called Chick. I wrote for its second season. I helped develop the plot for the second season, and then I actually got paid to write. I wrote a couple of scripts and got paid $50 for each. The show didn't materialize. The showrunner decided she wanted to pitch it to TV instead, and as of yet, that hasn't happened. And I think it's been about 4 years. I don't know what she's doing with it. I should drop her a line at some point, because, I mean, the stuff we came up with I thought was really interesting, and I really liked the stuff that I wrote for her.
How did you get into something like that?
I think it was a job listing on Mandy.com, which does a lot of industry, writing and directing and stuff. And sometimes it's doesn't pay a lot, or sometimes it doesn't pay at all. But occasionally I'll go on there and apply for writing gigs, and I happened to apply for this one and went and interviewed with the showrunner, and she and I got on quite well, and then she invited me to join the creative team, and it was a lot of fun. But yeah, nothing I wrote got filmed, unfortunately, but I'm very, very happy to say that I was very happy with what I wrote and very happy with the feedback I got from that. At the moment, I actually earn a little bit of money. I write articles for a website called Nerd Approved and a few of its sister sites. which is just pretty general, like geeky stuff. Like, look at this hovering Death Star lamp, and look at this, sometimes news updates about, things like the TV adaptation of Good Omens that Neil Gaiman's overseeing, or the Doctor Who showrunner changeover, or something really cool that someone's made out of Lego. And it's not necessarily. Here's the thing: is that kind of story, those kind of like regurgitated geek news websites, writing those kind of stories can be incredibly samey. But I try not to let it be that. I try to make my writing of those stories interesting in some way. I try to play with the format of those websites, and I try to write something that I'm not always interested in writing what I think is entertaining for the reader to read. I don't always think of it in those terms, but absolutely I think of it in terms of what's interesting for me to write, which means I feel very lucky to have been able to take a story about the Loch Ness Monster, or the discovery of a broken down Loch Ness Monster film prop at the bottom of Loch Ness, and kind of turn that article into a joke about clickbait. Or I did an article, I was asked to do a write-up, I mentioned this a second ago, but I was asked to write about a hovering Death Star table lamp. And in doing so, in checking the Amazon page, discovered that the product photos were some of the most appallingly, hilariously terrible photoshopped images I'd ever seen in my life. So when they sent me the link, my response to that was, well, if I'm going to write about this, I'm going to write about how terrible these photos are. So that's what my story was about, and they published it. Sometimes you write a joke or you try a concept and it doesn't work and it gets rewritten by the editor. That's fine. But one of the things I absolutely love about Nerd Approved, and it's those network of that network of sites, that's nerdalicious.com and fashionablygeek.com, is that Sean Fallon, who's the editor there, gives me free reign to try stuff, and if he likes it, it makes it to the website. If not, he edits it. But I have that freedom, and I genuinely, I really appreciate that, because it's so easy for websites that do that kind of, for want of a better term, regurgitated journalism, or regurgilism, which is not a word, but it should be.
Regurgilism.
Yeah. It's so easy for those sites to kind of fall into the same pattern and patter, and I try very hard to inject the stuff I write there with personality, and just really to justify whatever I'm being paid to write about, and to just make it entertaining, because anyone can bash out, hey, it's someone did a Lego recreation of the Winchester pub from Shaun of the Dead, which I haven't seen. That just popped into my head. I think that'd be really cool, actually.
Please, someone get on that.
Someone, please, absolutely. Let me know when you do, so I can write about it for the website. It's really easy to write. Look at this, isn't it neat? You can Little Mermaid your way through any kind.
I was just gonna make a Little Mermaid joke.
Yeah,
you beat me to it.
You can do it. You can write about who's it's and what's it's galore all you like, but you've got to find a way of doing that gets your personality across and that entertains yourself. And if you can entertain yourself, if you get lucky, you entertain readers at the same time. And that's my approach to writing that kind of material. And it's not what I want to be doing long term, and it's not necessarily what I saw myself doing when I thought getting paid to write. But you know what? I still do it, and I make it enjoyable. And I don't feel like I'm doing something that I would rather not be. I never sit down to write those articles thinking, I wish I were doing something else. Because whatever they ask me to write about, whatever links they throw at me, whatever products or cool things that they find that they want me to do the write-up for, I know that's a writing challenge. And I can make it entertaining for myself, even if no one else gets to see the version that I wrote, or no one else gets the joke, or no one else even sees it. I'm having fun writing that version of the article for myself, and just as often as not, that's the version that gets published, more or less. And I'm very, very happy that I have that kind of creative freedom.
Okay, I'm gonna have to wrap up this episode, but God, you gave so much advice. I'm like, geez. Any last minute advice you'd like to give to anyone who's looking to become a writer?
I think the best advice I can give you is learn the difference between constructive criticism and bullshit. And not only learn the difference between the two, learn the difference between how you feel about both. Bullshit is when someone looks at something that you've drawn or written or recorded or any kind of creative work that you've created, and they go, it's a bit shit, isn't it? This is rubbish. It's not very good. Like,
they might not use those British terms, but
they may not use those terms, but there's no substance to that. What do you mean it's not good? There's nothing there. You can't engage with that person because they're not giving constructive criticism. You're going to get that from friends, from family, from strangers on the internet leaving comments. This isn't very good. This video is terrible. There's nothing there. Ignore those people. Ignore the people who are trying to give you, or just trying to say this isn't very good, as if their opinion fucking matters. It doesn't matter whether they didn't like it. You know, that ultimately does not matter. But if someone is giving you a piece of constructive criticism, if you have recorded a song and someone says, this is quite good, I think the bridge, I think the guitar solo in the bridge doesn't quite work. I think maybe there's a couple of things you could do here and there. Or if you give someone a script and they say, I really like this, but I don't understand this character's motivation, you could remove this scene and streamline the story, or if you combine these characters, you know, learn the difference between bullshit and constructive criticism, and learn to differentiate between how you feel about the constructive criticism. If someone says to you, there are ways you could improve this, because that's what constructive criticism really is. If someone says to you, there are ways you can improve this, and here's how you could conceivably do that. If your first thought is, and if you get this with every piece of constructive criticism you get, how dare they? How fucking dare they? Then the problem isn't with them. The problem is with you. Like, I know people who have been given constructive criticism, really solid constructive criticism about stuff that they've written or produced or whatever, any kind of creative endeavor, to the point where they've either just had a little hissy fit about how dare they, I don't need to do this, make these changes, what I've done, this is art, to, well, I don't want to do this anymore. If your reaction to being told, you can make these improvements, here's something you could be doing differently, here's a technical thing that you need improving, that you need to improve upon, if your immediate reaction to that is, I don't want to do this anymore, then you didn't want to do it in the first place. You know? Mm-hmm. Think about why you have the reactions that you do to constructive criticism, and learn to differentiate those feelings. If someone gives you genuine constructive criticism and your first thought is, that could work, or even in the other ways, I see why you think that, I don't think it's the right call, but thank you for sharing. Like, those are the thoughts that you have that will take you on the path from being a good writer or a good creator to a fantastic one. You know, it's going to take you being able to discern the difference between wanting to punch someone in the face for telling you what they thought of your story, the difference between that emotional reaction and, you know, maybe that advice has some merit. And here's the thing: any advice that anyone gives you, you don't have to listen to a word that I've said during the course of this podcast. No. Do what you want to do, but also keep in mind that constructive criticism comes from somewhere, and non-constructive criticism, deconstructive criticism, whatever the term is for, that's just, oh, this is bullshit, this is terrible, it's awful, it's rubbish, mate. You don't have to pay attention to that. Because that doesn't have any merit. There's no weight there. But if learn to register. I'm talking in circles now. This is starting to lose its track. But yeah, learn to discern how you feel when you're given constructive criticism, and what that means for you as a creator. Because if your immediate reaction is, I don't have to listen to this, maybe you're not or if your immediate reaction is, I don't have to listen to this, or, well, I don't want to do this now because I'm not great at it already, then you didn't want to do it in the first place. If it takes one person saying this isn't very good because for you to put down the pen, or uninstall Scrivener from your laptop, or put the guitar in the cupboard and let it gather dust, your heart was never in it in the first place. Find something you care about, do something that you care about, whatever that may be, and do that.
That's really good to hear. Now it's plug time. Where can we find you?
All of my current stuff can be found on benpaddon.net. There are links there to everything I've done, am doing, or about to do, ranging from the Jump Leads webcomic to the upcoming audios, Boomer's Day Off, the Dalek Gary. I believe there is currently a link there for the Soul Geek Singles Nights, which I co-host in Van Nuys every 2 months with the aforementioned Dino Andrade. That's a geek singles night. If you're in the LA area, you're welcome to join us. I'm also on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Ben Paddon. I'm on Instagram. That's exactly the same, Ben Paddon. I'm on Tumblr, Ben Paddon. I think that my Facebook is facebook.com/Ben Paddon. These are all great places to find out what I'm doing and to get in touch. I always like hearing from people who, either are interested in what I've done, are interested in what I'm doing, or just want to chat. Like, I'm a lonely person. I like human interaction. So by all means, feel free to emote at me.
Oh, that's sweet.
This podcast is a part of the Benview Network.
You can find this and other podcasts like it at BenviewNetwork.com.